Good afternoon, everyone. We're going to go ahead and give Zoom a moment to catch up with us, and then we'll get started. Good afternoon, everybody. We're going to give Zoom just a couple more seconds to catch up with us, and we'll get started in a few minutes. Okay, I think we're going to go ahead and get started. We haven't had anyone new jump on in the past minute or so, so I think we're ready. Thank you for joining us this afternoon for an update about changes in utility billing. This is a landlord-focused workshop, and we will be here with a relatively high-level overview this afternoon and answer any questions that we can. It is April 30th, and my name is Patricia Black. I am one of the people who manages the Rent Stabilization Division for the City of Mountain View. And I am joined this afternoon by Andrea Kennedy. She also works with the division. And again, we're here to answer any questions that you might have. I want to take a special time, a little moment to say thank you for dealing with our slight time error in the email that originally went out. I appreciate your flexibility. It is indeed a 2 p.m. workshop, not a 1 p.m. workshop. So if you joined us at 1 and then realized that it was at 2, I really appreciate you coming back. And with that, we will get started. Okay, so I wanted to go ahead and just start the afternoon off by talking about what properties and units are covered or affected by the changes in the updates, the clarifications in these regulations. So it's landlords of units that are fully covered by the CSFRA. So this is our Community Stabilization and Fair Rent Act. If you are fully covered by that law, these clarifications in these regulations apply to your property. And if your tenants are currently paying utilities separate from rent and directly to the landlord or a third party. So this does not include sub-metered utilities. You can think of sub-metered utilities. We usually see that for bills like PG&E, where the property and the unit has its individual meter for each tenant's or each unit's individual usage. So if you have a situation like that, or if you have a situation where your utilities are already incorporated into rent, we'll talk about utilities where they're already incorporated into rent. You will still have to participate in the petition process, but it won't affect the rent that your tenants pay. If you have your utilities going through a third-party billing service like Conservice, or if your tenants pay you utilities directly to you as the property owner, separate from their rent, this is an important thing to know about, and we'll go over the high-level details of it this afternoon. This workshop, these updates in the utility billing regulations and clarifications in the regulations do not apply to partially covered CSFRA properties and partially covered CSFRA units. So if you're a property owner and you have units that were built after 1995, this does not apply to you. Also, this does not apply to mobile home parks or mobile home owners. So if any of those are your specific situation, you do not need to stay here. You can. We're more than welcome. We're more than happy to welcome you this afternoon if you want to just learn more about the laws in Mountain View. But this is not a workshop that will have a lot of information for you. So before I get going, are there any questions just about this area? Who does this apply to? What are we talking about in terms of coverage? If you have a question, you can go ahead and use the Q&A function or raise your hand, and we'd be happy to let you talk live. Okay, seeing no questions yet, I will move on. So this is the basics of the clarifications and the regulations. Under the CSFRA, and this has always been the case since we got the law and it went into effect, rent includes utilities. And that total amount is subject to our rent increase limitations, otherwise known as the Annual General Adjustment of Rent, the AGA. There can only be one rent increase in a 12-month period after the initial term of tenancy. Those are subject to our yearly rent increase limits. As I said just now, the Annual General Adjustment of Rent, the AGA. And you can think of it like there shouldn't be any fluctuating rental costs within a 12-month period. That could be taken as an unlawful rent increase from month to month. Back on December 18th of 2023, so just a few months ago, the Rental Housing Committee, which is the committee that oversees the Rent Stabilization Division, adopted regulations clarifying. They wanted to make sure that it was really clear to property owners and tenants that utilities are part of rent for units fully covered by the CSFRA. So if you're a fully covered unit, your utilities should be included in your total rent amount. So what type of utilities are included? Any utility charges that are paid by a tenant directly to the landlord or through a third-party billing service. This could include your water, your sewer, your garbage. It could include even electrical or gas, depending on how those are charged to tenants. Typically in Mountain View, we see gas and electric being provided sub-metered through PG&E, but not all units are like that. And I know some property owners out there have a charge for water heating that is not part of the sub-metered charges for PG&E. So keep that in mind. So again, it's utility charges paid directly by the tenant to utility services like PG&E or sub-metered units or sub-metered utilities that are exempt from this if they're paid to the landlord or through a third-party billing service like Conservice. They are included in this conversation. If you are a property owner that includes utilities in the total fixed amount of rent, that's totally okay. It's great. You're already there. You don't have to worry about this that much. You already know what your total base rent is. It doesn't really affect you or your tenants, except that you will still need to file a petition letting us know that you already include your utilities in your total rent amount and allow for your tenants to respond to that. If they say, no, that's not true, I pay my utilities through Conservice, then you'd have to finish the petition process. But in general, if you're a property owner who already includes your utilities in your total base rent amount, then you would just have to file a petition that says that for us. And our forms in the future will have an opportunity for that. All right, before I get going, I see there is a question. This question asks, my building has separate meters for PG&E for each unit, but the city of Mountain View sends one bill for water and sewer. Does this mean my building is affected by this rule? Yes, your building is affected by this rule. Well, likely, I mean, I'd have to take a look, but typically that's what we see. If it's like this and your tenants are paying for your utilities to you or through Conservice, then this would affect them. If you already include the costs of these utilities in your total bill, then again, it wouldn't affect what your tenants are paying, but you would still need to file a petition. Okay, thank you for that question. So what are the key points of the regulations? There's basically like three main areas that we are talking about here. For new tenancies that started March 1st or after, existing tenancies that started before March 1st, and then we'll talk a little bit about tenant petitions related to utilities. So for new tenants that started March 1st of 2024, The rent amount must include utilities, okay? So it's one total amount that has what we like to think of as your physical space rent, plus the utilities, plus what other additional housing services you might want to charge for. So like a parking space or storage or pet rent. Those can all be line item mentioned in the lease for a total amount of, let's say in this case, $1,000. Now, next year, when you go to give the AGA, if this tenant stays 12 months, you give the AGA on that total $1,000. So it would be $1,000 plus 2.4%, and that would be the total new amount for the new term of tenancy. So just keep in mind, for new tenancies, RUBS is not allowed. So charging through a third-party service like Conservice is no longer allowed. The total rent must include utilities. Sub-metered utilities are not included in this. The rental agreement or whatever you have that, some people don't have rental agreements, whatever you have that states what the total rent is, must state the total rent amount and specify the types of utilities and housing services that have additional costs are included in that total. So like I mentioned, you have your physical space rent and then whatever else is included in there for your total rent. And then once again, just to reiterate, utility charges paid directly by the tenant to a utility service provider like PG&E are exempt from this, okay? So again, new tenants' rent amount must include utilities. And I see your hands, and I'm going to go ahead and answer them after I get through these three main topic areas. So we just talked about new tenancies that started March 1st and after. For tenancies that started prior to March 1st, RUBS can continue, or your tenants can continue paying you for their utilities until this process happens. So there's this petition process that we're going to talk about, where you as the property owner file a petition with the city to incorporate the utility charges into that total rent amount. Okay, so there's this one-time special petition process that lets you add those utility charges into total base rent. If you miss this deadline, then you can no longer do that, and total rent is just going to be that physical space rent, and that will include utilities. So you really want to make sure that you're on top of this and working with us to get your petition filed so that you can get this utility adjustment included in your total rent. So existing tenancies. RUBS may continue until utility adjustment petitions filed with and approved by the city, by our division. Utility charges for vacant or newly rented units may not be allocated to existing rental units through RUBS or similar systems. So this is important. This is a big change. If you have vacant units, those vacant units cannot be added into the average for allocating utilities through RUBS, and the new units cannot be either. Utility charges that are paid directly by a tenant to the utility service provider, such as PG&E again, or are sub-metered, are exempt. Okay, so it's the three main things. Utilities can continue to be a separate charge from rent for existing tenancies until this petition process is done. And then lastly, I want to talk a little bit about tenant petitions. So everyone who's here should know that tenants are allowed to file petitions with the city for requesting downward adjustments of rent. And there are a few little rules now related to petitions that include utilities. So if a tenant filed a petition requesting a downward adjustment of rent before the regulations were adopted by the RHC, so prior to December 18th of 2023, and that petition has a final decision that incorporated utilities into the total base rent, the petition decision is valid. So that's one. Two, if the tenant filed a petition before December 18th, 2023, that included utility charges and that petition did not have a final decision, the utility portion of the petition will still be included in the decision during this transition process. So that means that if this petition was filed before December 18th of 2023, the petition decision can still incorporate utilities. If a tenant had, oh, there's a typo, this is correct, had filed a petition with us after December 18th that included utility charges, the utility charges of that petition will be paused and put on hold during the transition process. So what could happen here is that a petition could be filed for a bunch of reasons. So let's say there was an unlawful rent increase and there's some habitability concerns, and the pool was taken away on this property. And the tenant said, you know, my utility charges have been fluctuating up and down, and I'm filing for the utilities as well. In this petition, we would still be able to move forward with the pool. We would still be able to move forward with the habitability concerns. We could still move forward with the unlawful rent increase. But the utilities portion would be put on hold until after the one-time utility petition process for landlords is complete. Okay, so just that portion of the petition would be put on hold. If the landlord files their utility petition with us and we have an amount, then at the end of that, that gets added into the base rent in this petition decision, we're good to go. If the landlord does not file their utility petition with us, then the utilities portion of this petition could move forward, which means that a landlord could potentially lose out or have a significant award that they'd have to pay to the tenant related to utilities. And then the last group here is for petitions for utility charges only. If a tenant filed a petition that only includes utility charges after the December 18th, 2023 date, that's not allowed until after the deadline for the one-time utility petition has passed, unless a petitioner is alleging that utilities were once part of rent and the landlord's now charging for them separately. If that's the case, then a petition could move forward that's only related to utilities because it's a different grounds for petition. Whew, that's our basics. It's a lot to take in at once. I see I have some questions. I'm going to go ahead and answer the four in the chat, and then Elizabeth, I will answer yours. If a tenant who pays directly to PG&E moves out, does the new tenant still pay to PG&E? Yes. If it's submetered, it's submetered. Those bills go directly to the tenant. They're not paid to RUBS. They're not paid to you, the landlord. The tenant is paying them directly to the service provider, just like you can think of it like Comcast. If that's the case, then the tenant will continue to pay those submetered utilities directly to the service provider. In this case, I only need to include the City of Mountain View utilities in the rent and not PG&E. If PG&E is paid by the tenant directly to PG&E, you do not need to include it. That's correct. Can you give some examples of submeters, especially electricity and gas related, that would be exempt from RUBS? So again, if it's a submetered utility like PG&E, where each unit has their own meter that is recording exactly what the usage is of that unit, then that's a submetered unit, and that tenant is paying directly to, they have their own bill from PG&E for their exact usage, just like someone who lives in a single family home would have, then that's a submetered utility, and that is not included in this. Yes, this recording will be available to view later. And then lastly, where do we get this petition? So we will answer more details about the petition process in this. You haven't missed that yet. So I will go ahead and move forward after we chat and check in with Elizabeth. Hi, Elizabeth. I've allowed you to talk. Go ahead and unmute yourself.
Hi. So actually it's the same question. So all the utilities I already have included. For example, the City of Mountain View utility bill is already included in the rent. So I'm good, right?
You will need to file a petition with the city, and on that form, it will say something like, I already include utilities in my total rent amount. And you'll still have to prove that you already include utilities in that rent amount.
How can I prove?
We will have details on that as the petition process moves forward.
Okay, so, but the PG&E bill, is actually paid by the tenants, but now it's under my name, so they pay it to me, and then I paid it to PG&E. So all I have to do is change the PG&E bill under their name, and then
that is a conversation that you and I should have separately. That can get a little complicated.
Oh,
So we can talk about that, but right now that's considered not submetered. It's paid directly. They pay to you for one total bill that's split between however many units you have. That's not considered.
No. It's not. It's a submeter. It's exactly the bill that it's their bill. It's their apartment's bill. It's nothing to do with me.
But they pay it to you, and you pay PG&E.
Yeah, but because it's just under my name, you know, all the apartments PG&E account holder is my name. All I have to do is under their name, and then they can pay directly from now on, right?
So we would want to check in about that together. I'll follow up with you, okay? I'll find your name in the registration and I'll email you separately. Okay?
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Okay, it looks like we have 2 more questions. One person is asking if their tenants request to continue the current method in writing, can we continue the current practice? No, that is not allowed under the law. Can you confirm on our property, the gas is billed to the property, but each unit is submetered? Again, if it's charged through con service, you have to go through the utility petition process. So this next person asks a question again about utilities that are not submetered. That's what this whole process is for, and we will go over the petition process coming up next. Okay. And then I have one more. The meter is directly read by PG&E. That's not different from a main meter. What if the submeters are installed by the building owner? So I'm going to go ahead and allow you to talk, Ted. I believe this is your question, and we'll see if we can get this answered. And you should be able to talk now, Ted, and ask your question. You can go ahead and unmute yourself.
Hello, can you hear me now?
I can.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, so the question is, just as I stated, what if the submeters are installed by the building owner and not by PG&E? So just as a clarification, typically when you walk into a multifamily building, you will see a row of gas meters, a row of electricity meters. None of them really is a submeter. Every single one of them from PG&E, I actually talked to them, is a main meter. So you have a 5-unit building, you have 6 meters, 5 for each unit, and the 6th one is for the house. So if you look at those 6 meters, they're all the same. None of them is main, and they all have the same status. But then sometimes you walk into a building, you have a main meter that's read by PG&E, and then downstream from the main meter, you have submeters. Those are truly submeters that's installed by the building owner, and PG&E only reads the main meter. So in that case, I believe those submeters would qualify as the exemption from RUBS.
Who's paying the PG&E bill?
Could be the building owner. And then
so in that case, if the tenants do not receive their own bill from PG&E, then you would need to incorporate these utilities into the petition process. So it has to be the tenant paying the bill directly.
Yeah,
So
so
I, as the tenant, am paying my PG&E bill to PG&E. I, as the tenant, am paying my Comcast bill to Comcast. I'm not paying my landlord to then pay my utilities. I'm not paying Conservice to then pay my utilities, or any
Right.
other RUBS type situation.
Yeah, so on this one, we're actually in the middle of going through that route because we have a written email from Miss Kennedy, I believe. No, I'm sorry, not Miss Kennedy, Miss Anki. And the clarification from that email is that in that case, those will be qualified as submeters. And because each unit has its own submeter that measures exactly how much energy that particular unit is using. And then so
Since this is a unique situation to your property and your unit, I think it would be helpful to talk about this, just like I'm going to with Ms. Say, talk about this offline. So can I follow up with you and give you more details that are specific to your property?
Yeah,
after
that's
the
fine. I mean,
presentation? Okay,
right,
great.
yeah, because I just want to just say one more, maybe just 10 more seconds. Because we went through this in a long process, talking to PG&E, talking to the different electricians and plumbing companies for the gas. And we were thinking, and we also have a written email from your office. So, but but I just want to share our findings so that if someone is trying to go through the same route, they could consider the submeter route rather than going through the main meter route from PG&E. At
So
least as a
I will definitely
yeah.
follow up with you and make sure that we're giving you the best information possible. And go forward from there. Okay, so we will follow up with both Elizabeth and Ted about this information. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and move on to the utility petition process because I think that's going to answer a lot of questions that are popping up right now. All righty, so what is the next step if you had existing tenancies before March 1st? So for tenancies that existed before March 1st, oh, I do want to mention for the petition process, if you have tenants that moved in after March 1st and their utilities are not included in their base rent amount, they can file a petition for unlawful rent because the utility should be included in their base rent amount. So just want to highlight that. Okay, so how do utility adjustment petitions work? What are they and who are they for? That's what's coming up next. So big question, the one with all that we really need the answer to, what is this utility adjustment petition? What is happening here? So this again is a one-time process that allows property owners and landlords to incorporate utilities that are currently charged separately from rent and not submetered into a fixed amount that is included in a tenant's total rent. So you can think of it like this. The utility adjustment petition process is going to allow the landlord to take the physical space rent and the separate utilities, an average of those separate utilities, and add them together for a total base rent amount. You, as the property owner or the landlord, need to complete and file a petition. There's going to be forms and a process to qualify for and apply the adjustment to your total rent amounts. Okay, so this is the general gist of this process. Who does this apply to? So this is for property owners and landlords of units that are fully covered by the CSFRA, where the tenant is currently paying utilities separate from rent, either directly to the landlord or through a third party. Again, this does not apply to partially covered CSFRA properties or mobile homes. All right, so there's going to be a petition process. There will be forms, there will be steps you have to follow. These steps may change slightly from what I'm presenting here today, but you don't have to worry about that right now because by the time you're able to start applying for the petition, we will have everything 100% smoothed out, and the process will be very clear with very clear step-by-step instructions. So to prepare for this, you're going to need to gather some documents. The first thing that you're going to need to get is the property-wide utility bills from July 1st of 2023 through June 30th of 2024. You're going to also need your unit information. So you're going to need documentation for each unit on your property, including the number of bedrooms, kitchen, living room, floor plans, the date the tenant moved in, rent increase information, just some basic information about each unit on your property. And you're also going to need to provide documentation of common area facilities. Okay, so this includes your pool. If you have a lot of landscaping on the property, or if you have no landscaping on the property, do you have laundry facilities? We're going to need pictures, floor plans, Google image, satellite image from Google Maps showing that you have a pool or documenting that you don't have a pool. There are going to be examples in the petition process, so we don't need to get stuck on this here today. But I just want to flag it for you, things to start thinking about. Okay, so what does this process look like? It's relatively short and relatively easy. It's going to be handled all in-house by our team over here in the Rent Stabilization Division. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to fill out, this should say fill, not files, a property-wide petition form with per unit calculations. The form will do this work for you. We're going to have a workbook that does the calculations, we hope, correctly and accurately as possible. That doesn't mean you shouldn't check, but we are going to try and provide really great resources to make this as easy as possible for you. We're then going to take a look at your petition and your workbook and just generally check to make sure that it looks complete and to make sure that you have the documentation that you need. And then you're going to give that to your tenants. Once you give it to your tenants, we will take a look at it one more time and make sure that it is ready to be fully reviewed, and we'll send a notice of acceptance. Now, this is not a notice of acceptance that we accept the petition and everything is accurate and you can go ahead and raise the rent. No, this notice of acceptance will come from our office, letting you, the property owner, know and letting the tenants know that we are now entering into the formal review of your petition. And tenants will then have 30 days to respond to whatever it is that you put in the petition. So let's say they dispute that you don't have a pool when you really do, they're going to have an opportunity to respond. Okay, and then we will have a time period to review your petition. Depending on the size of your property, we may review all of the calculations, or we may review a percentage of the calculations at random to make sure that everything is looking good. And we'll review the tenant responses. We may request additional documents or some clarification if needed. And then if the calculations look good, or if they need corrections, we will let everyone know. And if they look good, we'll send out notices to landlords and tenants that the amount in the petition is correct, and then you as the property owner can add the utility adjustment amount that's determined in the petition with your next annually allowed rent increase. And we're going to give you all of the supportive materials for that to help you with that process. So there'll be templates on how to increase the rent appropriately. We'll let you know what you need to do to make it as clear as possible for your tenants as to what portions of their rent are being included and how things are changing. Once you give that increase notice that incorporates the utility adjustment into total rent, no longer can RUBS be used at all. If tenants are paying you, the landlord, utilities instead of to RUBS, that can no longer be allowed. You now have one total amount that is your base rent. Now, you can still show it on the bill separately, like here's your physical space rent and here is your utilities percentage, your utilities charges amount. You can consider breaking it down like that, and you may want to do that. We will give more guidance on that in the future, but I just want to mention that you'll have some options at this point, you'll have some options. Again, that might change in the future, but right now, that's how the regulations are working. So the next big question I'm sure you all have is, what are the filing deadlines for this? So we will be releasing the petition process in late summer of 2024, so August or September of 2024. And if you are a property with more than 20 units, you will need to file your petitions with us within 6 months of that release date. If you are a property with 6 to 20 units, you will need to file your petition with us within 9 months. And then if you are a property with 1 to 5 units, you'll need to file your petition with us within 12 months. So those are filing deadlines, and they're strict. If you miss the filing deadline and you have not provided your petition with the city, then there are some repercussions that happen. So once your petition calculations are confirmed, you've filed your petition, everything looks great, you, the property owner, can add in the utility adjustment amount determined in the petition with the next annually allowed rent increases. And you would do the calculation of the allowed rent increase as followed. You would determine the AGA on the existing rent and then add the utility adjustment amount to the new rent. No tenant hardship petitions will be allowed for the utility adjustment portion of the rent increase. So if you give a banked rent increase, tenants can still file a tenant hardship petition, but for the utility adjustment portion, they cannot file a hardship petition. Now, what happens if you don't file your petition on time with us? If you miss that filing deadline, it's not good. We really want to be on top of this. If you do not file a petition within the deadlines, you forego the one-time ability to add a utility adjustment amount to the rent, and you can no longer separately charge for separate utilities. So if you miss this deadline, you cannot charge RUBS. Just whatever that total base rent is becomes the total amount, including utilities. So if you were charging $1,000 for your physical space rent plus utilities through RUBS, and you miss this filing deadline, that total rent amount now includes utilities and is just $1,000. So you really want to make sure that you're with us and working on this process. The rent amount now automatically is assumed to include utilities, and tenants can file unlawful petitions with the city to recover any overpayment that they made through RUBS charges all the way back to the beginning of the CSF rate going into effect. So there's a pretty significant consequence if you don't file on time. Okay, so before we're almost done with kind of the presentation portion of our afternoon. Before I provide the resources that are available to you, I'm going to go ahead and start answering some more questions. So for how do I go about installing sub-meters for your triplex? So if you would like to install sub-meters, that is an option available to you, and you would need to reach out to the applicable departments. I believe you'd need to reach out to utilities to determine that next step. Is the adjustment amount fixed? Does it get adjusted if utilities rates increase? So once you go through this utility adjustment process and your utilities are incorporated into rent, they are incorporated into rent, and they will be applicable to the annual general adjustment of rent. So every time you go to increase the rent through the annual general adjustment of rent process, you will be able to, just like you do now, for a total of this year 5%, next year 2.4%, increase the total amount of rent that includes utilities by that AGA amount. If you're not able, as a property owner, to maintain your net operating income, then you can file a petition with the city for a fair return petition if that is the situation that you end up in. We began including utilities and rent for all new move-ins, great, which is paid by owner but sub-metered per unit because that's the information we're given by the city at that time. Sub-metered utility was exempt. You know, again, I want to go back and clarify on this, how this exactly works. So anonymous attendee, if you could, who asked this question, if you could please email me at patricia.black@mountainview.gov, that would be great. I want to make sure I'm giving the right information on this. And I just want to make sure that's 100% correct. So go ahead and email me so I can follow up with you. Because I just want to make sure that I'm, again, giving the correct information. When is the city going to announce the annual allowed rent increase? So we can combine everything together and not confuse tenants. So for this process where you're incorporating the utilities into your total rent, you have to follow this specific petition process, and that is going to take a little time. The petition process for this won't be released for starting the process until late summer. The annual general adjustment of rent for 2024 is valid starting September 1st of 2024. And you can give that increase while going through this petition process. And then the next time you're able to increase rent, apply your utility adjustment. That is one way to do this, or you can hold off on giving a rent increase until the utility petition is complete and then give one total increase at that time. So you have a couple options. And then to answer your question, the Rental Housing Committee adopted on Thursday, this past Thursday, April 25th, the new AGA for the September 1st, 2024 through August 31st, 2025 time period of 2.4%. So hopefully that answers that question. When will RUBS end? So again, this is a little bit flexible because of how you apply for the utility petition process by the size of your property, and how you give increases after that. So this is right now, it could be, I could see maybe a property owner being able to first increase rent with including the utilities for those larger properties that file with us. Within the 6-month time frame, I could see maybe 8 months from now, 9 months from now, that would start seeing the transition away from RUBS. If it's a new tenancy, RUBS is no longer allowed after March 1st. What happens if a landlord doesn't file a petition, but a tenant moves out? Can the landlord charge the new tenant for the utilities? So it needs to be any tenancy that starts after March 1st has to include, and I'm going to go back to the slide that shows this. It spells it out pretty clearly. If it's a new tenant, RUBS is not allowed, and utilities being paid to a landlord is not allowed. The total rent must include utilities, and whatever kind of rental agreement you have must state the total rent amount and specify the types of utilities and housing services that are included in that total amount. So you would have your physical space rent, let's say a physical space rent of $1,000. You would have your utilities, let's say your utilities are $100. So it would say physical space rent, $1,000. Utilities, $100. Let's say you have a parking space, $50. Total rent is $1,150. That is the rent for the term of tenancy, and that includes utilities. At the end of the term of tenancy, you can increase the rent, including all of those line items, by the annual general adjustment of rent. In my triplex, there's a duplex which is not covered. This means my property is not fully covered by the CSFRA. Your property, that is not what we mean by partially or fully covered. So we're talking about fully covered units, not necessarily, I guess if you want to think of it like that, fully covered properties. That single family one or whatever, I'm not sure how you have a triplex with a duplex, but if your property has a duplex and a single family home, that single family home is fully covered by the CSFRA So this utility clarification would be applicable to your property. If your units are paying utilities through RUBS, if it's a duplex that is paying utilities for RUBS, this again is not applicable because duplexes are not covered by the CSFRA. If we hold off on the new increase, can we still charge RUBS until we get accepted for the amounts? You can continue to charge RUBS until the utility adjustment petition process is complete. And then when you give the next rent increase, you would incorporate it into rent. Just like we show here and here. And you have to file once the petition process is live, which will be sometime in the late summer. Will there be any documents we need to include for existing tenants, addendum or amendments for this increase to include? Yes, you can see here a list of some of the documentation that you will need to provide. This is not a full list. We will have forms that go over this and provide all of the information you need that go into details about this. Will you be able to collect utilities until the utilities are included in the rent? Otherwise, it seems tenants would not be paying rent for several months. I'm not sure 100% what the end of that question means, but we'll go back to existing tenants. RUBS may continue until a utility adjustment petition is filed with and approved by the city. So, and then that increase is incorporated into rent. So you can continue to charge RUBS until the petition process is complete. If units have been fully included in if utilities have been fully included in total rent in the past, but the landlord wants to file a petition to begin a new rental agreement that talks about utilities separate from base rent. Nope, that is not allowed. So that would be an unlawful rent increase. If you currently, and we talk about this here a little bit, let me go back. If you already include utilities in the fixed amount, you have to continue to include utilities in the fixed amount. If you don't, that is considered an unlawful rent increase, okay? And we don't want that. When a tenant moves out, then you would have your new lease that incorporates utilities as a fixed amount. So again, you can't have separate utilities unless it's sub-metered, all right? If you have sub-meters, that's allowed. If you don't have sub-meters, that's not allowed, and it's considered an unlawful rent increase. All right, let's see if I can answer this question. If a tenant rental increase happens before this review is accepted, okay, yeah, you can increase the rent before this petition process is final. That's fine. But the process is accepted in November. The tenant will not pay utilities until June 1 of 2025. Nope. I see what you're asking here. That's a good question. So my understanding is that the increase that incorporates the utilities, if you give an increase in June, so let's say the petition is accepted in November, you would need to wait to incorporate that utilities adjustment into your June 2025 increase. That's correct. But I believe that you would still be able to use RUBS until that increase is incorporated. And for renewals, should we be adding the increase plus the utilities into the lease renewal? Do you mean now already? Well, you don't know what your utilities are yet for your petition process. So you wouldn't be able to add the utilities into that new lease because you haven't gone through the petition process. So again, we're going to have more details. We'll have our forms. We'll have all the documentation as we move forward in this process. This is a high level. We want to touch base and make sure everyone is still with us and on the same page and that we're all talking about the same thing and understanding everything as much as possible. So we will have more of these details fleshed out, and we have another one of these workshops coming up in June, and I'll make sure we have some really solid answers on what to do if your units are sub-metered, but you, the landlord, are paying PG&E. So I'm going to get that clarification and let you know about that. If utility, we have one more question here. If utilities have been included, but the tenant moves out, can a landlord draft a new lease that incorporates utility adjustment? If you have a new tenant, your new tenancy, your new total rent amount, like it states here, you should already have the utilities in that new total rent. So again, you'd have your total rent amount and it would include utilities. So there would be no utility adjustment because you've already included utilities in that new lease. So your rental agreement, just like the third bullet states here, must state the total rent amount and specify the type of utilities and services that are included. So you'd have your physical space rent of $1,000, your utilities of $100, and let's say there was a parking space for $50. You would then have all of those add up to show your total rent for the unit of $1,150. Okay, so that's how you can think of that. That's a good way to think of it. Hopefully that answered that question. All right. Okay, so we are just about wrapping up here. So how can you get more information and more help? Just in general, we have office hours every Tuesday. So you could have joined us today from 10 to 12. And you can join us at those office hours. They're always virtual by going to mountainview.gov/RSP office hours. Or you can come to our Housing Help Center for landlords and property owners. We hold this every first and third Thursday of the month from 1 to 3 p.m. You can come directly to our office at 298 Escuela Avenue, or you can join virtually by going to mountainview.gov/housing help clinics. And we will have one this Thursday at 1 o'clock because it is the first Thursday of the month. And this isn't just about utility petitions. You can ask us any questions. If you have questions about how to register your property or how to pay your rental housing fees, again, if you want to increase rent or even you increase rent or apply for these utility petitions, you have to be in compliance with the law, which means you have to have paid your rental housing fee and you have to have registered your property. So if you haven't done that, you're going to want to contact us as soon as possible to pay your fee and register your property. There is a portal at mvrent.mountainview.gov that you need to register your property and units at. If you haven't done that, you are out of compliance with the law and you cannot increase rent, which may affect your ability to incorporate utilities into rent. So please, please, please reach out to us. We are here to help you. We provide services to property owners all of the time, and we are ready to assist in whatever way we can. So please reach out to us. And again, we have office hours every Tuesday, and you can join those by going to mountainview.gov/RSP office hours, or you can come to our Housing Help Clinic, either in person at 298 Escuela at our offices. We have a great community room, or by joining virtually by going to mountainview.gov/housing help clinics. And you can always give us a call as well. You'll see our contact information here. You can email us at mvrent@mountainview.gov. You can give us a call at 650-903-6136, or you can visit us at mountainview.gov/rent stabilization to just learn more about the law. We have information on the utility changes, on how to increase rent lawfully, what you need to do if you need to file a petition, general information about the law. Our FAQs are there, and you can get a lot of information resources there. And I see I have 2 more questions. Do new rental agreements need to show what part of total rent goes to utilities? Yes, they do. Just as we state here, if you have a tenant that moved in as of March 1st, it needs to be spelled out in the lease. How do we reach you through email? You can email us at mvrent@mountainview.gov. Right here. And then someone asks, what happens when a tenant adds a pet later? That's a great question, Candace. There is a petition process for that. And there's also a few options on how you put that in your lease. So Candace, if you'd like, I can follow up with you after this workshop to go over that in more detail with just you. Okay, well, that brings us just about to the 2 o'clock, or to the 3 o'clock, excuse me, hour. Where can you find this video? We will be sending a link to this presentation to everyone who has signed up and registered for this workshop tomorrow. You should receive one tomorrow. And it will also have the PowerPoint as well. So, and I will include an information sheet about the utilities updates and clarifications in the regulations so that you have all of the information you need. So you'll get an email from us with a link for this video. All righty. Are there any other questions? I am happy to answer any other questions that you might have. All righty. Ted, I'm going to go ahead and allow you to talk. You can unmute yourself.
Hello? Yes, I can stay back a few minutes to forward you the email from Anki if that's helpful.
Sure, we can talk about that after, or we can set up a time to discuss after this.
Yeah, I'm available right after the call. I don't know your how about your schedule? If you want to schedule a separate time, that also works for me.
Let's go ahead and hop off this call since this is being recorded and get a separate call going. Okay, so you can email me, Ted, at patricia.black@mountainview.gov. I'll go ahead and put it in the chat. I think you should be able to see it. And I'll put this for everyone. And then we can go ahead and schedule a time to discuss together. Were you able to see that in the chat there, Ted?
Yes, I got it. Thank you.
Okay, great. Does anyone else have any questions this afternoon that I can go ahead and answer? Is there supposed to be an additional utility addendum with the estimated cost for the utilities? Darcy, can you go ahead and raise your hand so that I can answer that, so that you can ask that question? I'd like to get some clarification on what you mean there. Okay, Darcy, I'm going to allow you to talk. Go ahead. You should be able to unmute yourself. And I see you're unmuted, but I can't hear you, Darcy. I still can't hear you. You're unmuted, but I can't hear you. I'm gonna go ahead and guess that you're talking about the county utility oh gosh, schedule. We'll just use schedule for lack of a better word. So there's going to be two ways that we will look at and determine what the utility increases are. And one of them is a breakdown of the costs. The utility costs averaged across the property, then divided by room calculations in each unit. So we'll take a look at that and compare it to the county's utility assessment, and whichever one of those is lower is the amount that the increases will be able to be raised by. I think that's probably what you're talking about. So when we have that available, we will provide that, of course, in all of the materials, because it's going to be one of the it's going to be one of the comparators. And it looks like you're thinking you're asking a different question. Do you want to try clarifying in the question and answer section there, Darcy? If not, you can go ahead and email me, and we can get that figured out separately. So you can email me using the email that I put in the chat, or by going to mvrent@mountainview.gov. Laura is asking if we'll be having an in-person seminar this evening. We are having a hybrid, so in-person and virtual this evening. It is at the Plaza Conference Room at City Hall, and it's tenant focused. So where this one was specifically focused toward property owners, the one this evening is focused toward tenants, so that they have the information that they need as well. However, anyone is able to join. So if you want to come to that, you are more than welcome. And Andrea Kennedy, can you remind me what time that is? I'm getting confused. This is 6 or 6:30?
6:30.
Okay, so this evening, Plaza Conference Room, 6:30, or you can register just like you did this afternoon and join virtually again. But we will be sending out this workshop video, plus the PowerPoint, plus any handouts that are applicable to everyone who registered. So you'll also get this supportive material as well. All right, Elizabeth, I see you have your hand raised again. I'm going to allow you to talk. You can go ahead and unmute yourself.
Yeah. Did you say you want to talk to me separately?
I will follow up with you about your questions regarding the utilities.
Yeah. Why don't you, why can I call you? What time?
You can go ahead and email me at that email that I put in the chat, patricia.black@mountainview.gov, and we can find a time to schedule a time to discuss.
I
Okay?
think I'm good. My rental agreement is they pay their own utility bills, and then they pay their own meter utility bills, and then I include all the university the city of Mountain View utility bills.
So
in
I think we're probably going to want to follow up with each other. I want to make sure that you have
all
the
right,
right information.
let me email you. Okay.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
All right, does anyone else have any other questions? I see some regulars on here, so if you have any questions, now's a good time to ask. All righty, if you have any questions, you can always email me. Most of you know my email address. If you have any general questions, of course, you can email mvrent@mountainview.gov, and we will get back to you as quickly as possible. Now, keep an eye out for this workshop. The email will come to you tomorrow with a link to this recording, and it will have the PowerPoint and a handout or two in there as well. So you should have everything that you need. And again, we're going to have a follow-up workshop in June. Andrea Pena, do you remember the date on that workshop in June?
I can pull it up for us here.
Perfect. So give me 1 second. We'll just let you know when the workshop in June is. I want to say that it's June 18th, but I'm not 100% sure if my memory is serving me correctly. And we'll have a little bit more details about the petition process itself. As you can see, we're slowly rolling things out to get everybody on board and also not be completely overwhelmed at one time. So give us one moment while we check that workshop date.
It is the June 18th.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. So June 18th, we're going to have a workshop similar to this one. It won't be the same content. It will have some similar information, obviously. So please go ahead and join us. It will be at 2 o'clock, just like this one. You can register for it by going to mountainview.gov/RSP workshops. I think that's right. Yeah, we look forward to speaking with you all then. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. I know it's a slightly complicated concept to wrap your head around, but we are here every step of the way to provide support, and we will do that. Thank you again, and have a great afternoon.